Welcome to the third episode of the second season of the Connor and Heffernan Show. I'm Mark, my co-host Montana here. We're gonna break down a lot of things football oriented between college and the NFL. Obviously, this past weekend in college football was a huge rivalry weekend. A lot of trophy games and all that. We'll get to a few of them here. Um, few of the big games that happened over the weekend, the Egg Bowl, number 20 Ole Miss gets upset against Mississippi State. Did you catch any of that game, man?
I did. It was a really solid. Oh, whoops, my video. There we go. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm in now. Sorry, a little technical difficulty. It was a good game. It was exciting. I mean, a lot of the thing about a lot of these rivalry games is even though sometimes we see these teams that are ranked way above the opponents, every time we get a rivalry game or a trophy game, usually it's anybody's ball game. Me and you both know this, especially looking at our boys this last weekend. We know that
Yes, sir.
game. It's always anybody's game. It doesn't matter what game of the season it is. It's anybody's game, especially those rivalries. So I caught a lot of the big ones, and I did catch that one. I thought it was a solid game. I think we're seeing a lot of really solid talent on both sides, and I think that throughout all these rivalry games, I think we saw some pretty even matchups. We saw a lot of games. Not every game is going to be super even, but for the most part, they were pretty much, going punch for punch, most of these rivalry teams this last weekend.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of them were fun to watch. The Egg Bowl obviously being one of them, a really good game. Kind of lower scoring, kind of what you expect in an Egg Bowl between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Another one that kind of intrigued me, at least early on, was number one Georgia and Georgia Tech. Because for a while there, it looked like Georgia Tech had Georgia right where they wanted them. It was 10-7 at the end of the first half. I don't think anybody would have thought it would have been a 10-7 game going into the half, especially against the number one team in the country. Everybody knew that, or everybody thought, excuse me, that Georgia was going to go into that game, take care of business, but it took them a while to get things going.
They didn't have it the whole first half. They didn't have it at all. They looked like two evenly matched teams. Georgia did not look like the number one team in the nation that first half.
No, and we all know Georgia Tech doesn't have the talent level that Georgia does.
No,
so
not close.
Yeah, no. So that just goes to show that Georgia walked into that game and they sleptwalk into it, at least the beginning part of it, which kind of shocked everybody. They ended up pulling away though. They outscored Georgia Tech in the second half 27-7. So they did take care of business.
They didn't have anything left after
the
first half. They used everything they had in that first half because the fact that it was that close of a game, it just shows that, I mean, Georgia Tech used everything they had that first half. Georgia has too much talent to keep it closer than it was. The fact that it was only 37-14, and Georgia Tech is not a super solid team. They're not a team with a winning record. They're not a team that's done anything that crazy. So the fact that they kept it that close, that's a win enough for them. Honestly, they should be proud of themselves just how close the game was.
Absolutely. And I'm just looking at the stats here. Georgia could not get anything going through the air at all. Stetson Bennett for Georgia was 10 of 18, only had 18 attempts for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. All of their offense for the most part was on the ground, and they had 264 rushing yards. So obviously, Georgia had a pretty high-powered offensive attack, especially throwing the ball going in. You got to tip your hats off to Georgia Tech for, accounting for their downfield attack and forcing Georgia to beat them on the ground, which Georgia ultimately did at the end.
Oh yeah. And again, Georgia is the more talented team, but this should be kind of a wake-up call, because we've seen these teams, we've seen Tennessee, they've fallen. We've seen these teams fall. We've seen
Yep.
Ohio State fall. Now, these are still great teams, but they've fallen in the rankings. And once you've fallen in college football rankings, it's a short enough season that it's pretty hard to get back up once you've fallen. So we've seen these teams fall. Georgia should be aware, because you are a talented team. You are
Yep.
a national champion-esque team. But if Georgia Tech had enough in their tank to make this a game, because you can say this was a hell of a ball game. You couldn't say that if Georgia won, 50 plus to 10, but they didn't win 50 plus to 10. They won 37 to 14. So this should be not a wake-up call to Georgia. I don't know about you, but to me, if I'm a Georgia fan or a coach or a player, it's my opportunity to be like, yeah, we're great, but we're not great enough to just be, scot-free. We're not going to make it through
Yep.
this season without any problems. It's going to be a journey. And to make it back to a national championship and to try to have the success you had previously, when you have a game like this against Georgia Tech, this is to me a wake-up call for Georgia at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. Especially once we get into the playoff, that's if they can escape the SEC championship with a victory over LSU. But once they get to the playoff, they can't afford to have a first half that they did up against Georgia Tech. Because if they do, they're going to be in a lot of trouble, because they're going to be playing one of the top 4 teams in the country. And you're playing a team almost as, if not as talented as you. So yeah, they've got to figure some things out, because they can't afford to sleepwalk into anything else.
Definitely not. They won't make it out like they did this time if they sleepwalk again.
So another really good rivalry game this weekend, and I got to catch the second half, which I'm glad I did. Oregon State and Oregon. Oregon had Oregon State dead to rights. And Oregon State comes back, scores 28 unanswered points to beat Oregon 38-34. Probably one of the most incredible comebacks I have ever witnessed in my life. And that Oregon State crowd was absolutely rocking. You can kind of feel the energy through the television set, which was actually kind of cool. But yeah, let's talk Oregon a little bit. Kind of a disappointing end of the season, speaking that they were up such a big margin against Oregon State.
I mean, it is like, in my opinion, if I'm an Oregon fan, or if I'm especially an Oregon critic, this was the end of Oregon's season. This was Oregon's chance to prove that they were one of those top teams and that they could go out and not drop that game. But Oregon State is a team, I mean, they scored 21 points in the fourth. That's
Yep.
who Oregon State is. Oregon, 3. So when we look at that, the pendulum has really swung, because Oregon, I think, would be viewed as the top, program in Oregon. And it is that, elite program. But Oregon State, especially that statistic of scoring 21 in the fourth and showing that they didn't want to give up and that they were still in it up until the end, and coming back and again, I would agree, this is one of the best comebacks. I also caught really only the second half, a little bit of the end of the first, but mostly the second. But that's when the game really got exciting. That's when it really became a ball game. So, I think Oregon State is a team that we need to keep on the radar for the next few seasons, because are they going to be a top 4 playoff team this season? No, they're not going to do that, but they're going to have themselves a great bowl game. And maybe we'll see them in the top 4, top 6, top 4 the next few seasons, because they look like an elite program. So, all the props out to them. That was a great game. One of the best teams I've seen.
Yeah, I agree. Oregon State is one of those surprise teams for me this year, because as we all know, we're not used to Oregon State being towards the top in the Pac-12. But they rattled off a really good season. They finished 9-3, 6-3 in the Pac-12, looking to get a pretty decent bowl bid as well, in a season that everybody pretty much had them written off. So hats off to Oregon State. And if there's any Oregon State fans in here, congratulations on a great season, and a wonderful comeback victory. Because yeah, it was one of the most incredible comebacks I've ever witnessed in my life. Another big rivalry game this weekend was between South Carolina and Georgia, or South Carolina and Clemson, excuse me. South Carolina went into Clemson, Death Valley, and pulled out a 1-point win, 1-point upset over number 8 Clemson. What were your thoughts on that game? It was a really good game all around.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. People forget that South Carolina is led by, I believe, Spencer Rattler. He's an elite quarterback. He's an elite. They're not a team. I think that they're viewed not unfairly because they haven't been a team that has been a top tier team to talk about year in and year out. But they are definitely a team that has the talent now, and I believe that Rattler is a senior this year, or he either has, this is his last year or he has 1 year left. But either way, I think that he is a player that if he would have had more time with this team would have turned them into a national championship-esque team. And he's proven that, pulling off two, pretty back-to-back monumental wins. He can beat those top tier teams, those blue blood teams that everybody talks about. So shout out to South Carolina, but especially shout out to their quarterback, because people forget just how great he is. And I think he's one of the most underrated college football players that we've seen. So shout out to them. That was a monumental win, not a national championship, but it sure probably felt pretty close to one for them.
Oh, absolutely. I honestly did not expect South Carolina to go into Clemson and pull it off, but Spencer Rattler had himself a really good day. He went 25 of 39, 360 yards and 2 touchdowns against a Clemson defense, which is in the top 15. So he did his part. Kind of South Carolina is definitely going to be a team to watch in the SEC here within the next couple of seasons, because I think they can find their way up and they can probably bite a couple of teams in the butt in the SEC. They've got the talent to do so, and they're going to have another really good recruiting class coming in next season. So Spencer Rattler, if he sticks around, is going to have some more weapons to work with. I think South Carolina can be a potentially dangerous team down the road.
Oh, I think that, and they've been a team that has just been lacking that centerpiece player. And I think Rattler is. And again, Rattler has been, I don't want to say unfairly written off, because he definitely has his, fair share of downfalls like any quarterback or any player has, but he's a super talented player. And if he did stick around, we might see them be a team to talk about. He definitely has shown that they are one of those top end teams, especially pulling off more than one victory with that type of magnitude. You don't just do that if you're a regular player. And most people look at the quarterback as the leader of a football team. So if that's the case, if you're leading them to these big victories, the future's bright if he chooses to stick around and see what can come. But even if he doesn't, I think this South Carolina team is going to be a team to look at for the top 10 next season.
Absolutely. I agree. I think they could potentially be a top 10 team next year. Definitely going to be interesting, especially if Spencer Rattler were to stick around. Then I can for sure say that they can potentially be that caliber. But if Spencer Rattler doesn't stick around, hopefully they have somebody else to back him up. Because again, they haven't had that centerpiece. And if they lose that centerpiece, they could very well be in some trouble if they can't find somebody in the transfer portal, or if they can't recruit a pretty high class quarterback from high school. So yeah, time will tell with that one. A very big upset happened this weekend. Texas A&M beat number 5 LSU 38-23. LSU wasn't really in the game at all. They about the closest that they were was when it was 17-10 at half and Texas A&M was still up. When I was watching this game, I didn't expect Texas A&M to show up as energized as they were. That crowd was energized, and that reflected on the players and everything. What are your thoughts on Texas A&M capping off a disappointing season with such an upset?
So yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Us as college football fans know, because we've witnessed this. We've actually, I would say we've had a shared experience with this, because I would say our team, I'm going to call it an upset just because of where our team has been at this last season record wise. But we understand that when you go an entire season and you underperform, especially Texas A&M has been a program that's kind of been a roller coaster experience. I think
Yep.
their fans have really gone all the way up. They've also gone all the way down, and they've witnessed both sides of that. And the highs are really great, but the lows are really difficult. And I think that is something that Texas A&M has witnessed. And so I think that pulling off a victory like that is huge. And again, LSU, in my personal opinion, is a team that we saw them win a national championship and then kind of dip. They've not
Yep.
been the team they've been since they won that championship. And a lot of it, injuries or players that graduated, this and that. You can say what you want. They're not that team. They are not a national championship or even a top 5 caliber team, because we saw them get super close and then so close and yet so far. So this has to be a huge confidence boost for Texas A&M, but it also has to be kind of a jab to LSU, because LSU has proven they can't get it done. They can't be a clutch team. Had they won this game, would their standings be different? Would they have a different placing? Potentially. So it is a big, it's a bigger disappointment for LSU fans than anything else. But shout out to Texas A&M, because me and you both know you can have a really crappy season, but if you pull off that upset last game of the season, you feel pretty darn good.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely a momentum boost after a disappointing season for A&M. Because we all see in the recruiting rankings, A&M has the talent to be up there with the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Tennessees, but they didn't put it together this year. So whether it means making some changes on the coaching staff for next season, maybe that's the boost that they need, because we all know that they can recruit. They signed the #1 recruiting class this last offseason. So yeah, very big momentum boost, and maybe it'll end up carrying over into next year. We'll definitely see. As far as LSU goes, yeah, they cannot get it done. Will Brian Kelly get them to the point where they can get them done? Maybe, but it remains to be seen. Because as we all saw with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, he got Notre Dame into really big situations. He could never get it done at Notre Dame, whether it be winning a national championship, because the first national championship he went to was against Alabama, and he got absolutely boat raced. And he's in the SEC now, where he has to face Alabama year after year because it's a big rivalry game. So he needs to figure things out very quick. Otherwise, I think the Boo Birds will start coming out in LSU if he can't find a way to beat those teams consistently.
And they won't. They won't. They're not that team. And I think that we saw, I don't want to say that they're a team that sold out, but we basically saw, their former head coach, championship winning head coach. He kind of sold out in the fact that won a championship, had all that success, and then had a losing season the next season and just was done. It's just,
Yeah.
it feels very much like LSU is a fan base that was kind of left stranded by their head coach, the coach that brought them so much notability, and I feel like promised more than what he gave, and then that's it, and you're just, hey, I took my money and I'm gone. And
Yep.
he's done an interview where he literally admits that. He's like, yeah, they paid me, I got paid, I won a championship, and that was that. That's fair, but the fact that he has that attitude just kind of, I think, hurts LSU fans a little bit more, because this was supposed to be your guy. He won you a championship with Joe Burrow of all quarterbacks, because I'm sorry, but until his last few seasons in college, he wasn't a super notable guy. So
No.
it's just, it leaves a sinking feeling. And as a fan base such as the Huskers, I believe I'm wearing a Husker shirt at the moment, actually, as a fellow fan of a fan base that has won championships and had a steep decline, it sucks to see another championship, I feel like, or another championship, another team that has had that success that I feel like will slide, because I think LSU is just going to keep sliding.
Yeah, I agree. It's very possible. Again, it all depends on how good can they recruit. Because right now LSU is in the middle of a talent hotbed. If they can pull in that talent that's in Louisiana, as well as pulling in talent from Texas and stuff like that, good talent, I think they can be an 8, 9, 10 win team, but they're not going to be anything more than that. Um, unless they can start beating these other teams on a consistent basis. And I'll continue beating that dead horse, but until something changes, that's just what's going to happen. Um, that's, in my opinion, what Brian Kelly is going to be good for is getting him 8, 9, 10 wins a year.
Oh no, I agree. I don't think you expect much more. And that's more success than some teams see that kind of have a decline. But
Yep.
again, I mean, you're looking at a team that won a championship within the last 5 years. Wouldn't you want to make a push for another one? But you don't have your coach, you don't have a lot of those players. I mean, you lost a lot of what made you great. So I think LSU is one of the worst teams and one of the worst, situations to win a championship that we've seen in college football within the last like 10 years, because a lot of
Yep.
the other teams, maybe they haven't won it the year after, but they've at least been a top 8 team following. And LSU went from up here all the way down here. So, I don't have any problem with LSU. They don't play the Huskers rarely, that we don't see that, so I don't really have a problem with them, and I hope they don't see a super steep decline, because that would be really tough, especially for a team that just won a championship.
Yeah, I agree. We'll talk more on LSU and other teams in the SEC when we go through the off season. We start talking spring football and stuff like that. Transitioning over to Big Ten this weekend. Had some pretty notable rivalry games in there as well. We had number 3 Michigan go into number 2 Ohio State and pull out a 22-point win over Ohio State. Michigan is legit, man. I don't think there's anything else you can say about them. They are for real. Um, they they came out in the second half and outscored Ohio State 28-3 behind Donovan Edwards, 22 carries, 216 yards, and 2 touchdowns. What are your thoughts on this Michigan team? And do you think they have what it takes to potentially win it all if they can come out of Indianapolis with a Big Ten championship? Do you think this is a national championship caliber winning team with what we have seen this year? Because I honestly think they do.
So Michigan as a college, and I'm going to say this, as an entire school, has seen two of the most iconic sports teams in college football history. One was that basketball team, the Fab Five. That team was electric. That was an absolutely iconic basketball team. And then you
Yep.
have this year's Michigan football team. This is that team. This is a team, in my opinion, that stands alone as Michigan greatness. So I think we are looking at the potential national champions. I do think they have what it takes. We saw them last year jump that first hurdle to becoming that relevant team that people are talking about, like, okay, we think they could maybe win it within the next few years. They have promised. They are that team now. They jumped that next hurdle flawlessly, and I think we are looking at a team that could absolutely be crowned the national champion without a doubt. I think that I don't want to say it's theirs to lose, but I think that it's getting close to theirs to lose, because it is an iconic team that I think has a greatness level that's one step above the other competition. Even teams like Georgia that are great, that are awesome, that get themselves out of, like we saw this weekend, really tough situations. I still think this Michigan team is a step above those teams.
I agree. Michigan on both sides of the ball. They have a really good offense. They're a balanced attack. They don't just throw the ball downfield, but they can run it at a pretty efficient clip as well. And it all starts up front. They've got a really good defensive line. They've got a really good offensive line that stacks up with anybody here in the country. So yeah, I was still kind of shocked with the result. I thought Ohio State was going to put up more points than they did, but you got to give Michigan a lot of that credit because they came out of halftime and adjusted very, very well to what Ohio State was going to do. Because in the first half, it looked like Ohio State was going to do whatever they wanted to do, especially with Marvin Harrison Jr., who happens to be one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in all of college football right now. Um, yeah, I Michigan's legit, and I think whoever they face, they're going to get everything that Michigan has to offer. And I think Michigan, as far as being one of the more talented teams in the country, they can very well be the national champion at the end of the year. We'll definitely talk about more about Michigan and what they can possibly do in the playoff as we get a little bit closer. Um, Another big, long tenured rivalry game. Probably, I believe this is the longest tenured rivalry game in all of college football between Minnesota and Wisconsin. Minnesota beat Wisconsin 23-16. Wisconsin finishes the season 6-6 when everybody else had them picked to potentially win the West Division. Obviously, they didn't pan out. Minnesota is a pretty solid team. Obviously, they were going to need some help to get into Indianapolis. They were going to need Purdue to lose, and they were going to need, I believe, Illinois to lose ahead of them to potentially get in. Obviously, Illinois and Purdue ended up taking care of business, and Purdue is going to Indianapolis. What are your thoughts on Minnesota? And as we all know, the big news in Wisconsin today, Luke Fickell is going to be the next head coach. What are your thoughts on Minnesota? And then what are your thoughts on Wisconsin this season? And with Luke Fickell as their next coach, what are your thoughts to maybe Wisconsin making that next step and possibly being back in the West contention?
Yeah, so I mean, Wisconsin has needed to make a change. I think Wisconsin is a team that has been kind of middle of the pack. A lot of these Big Ten teams at least pull off winning seasons year after year and look like pretty decent teams. But I think Wisconsin has kind of started to slip below their standard because I think a lot of these Big Ten teams have a standard that is set. You look at a team, like an Ohio State or a Michigan, their standards up here. You look at a team more like a Michigan State, their standards are more middle ground. Wisconsin is a team that I feel like to pile themselves in with the top tier expectations in the Big Ten, but they've been very middle of the road these last few years. So I think that this coaching change, I think that'll be a good change. I think we'll see the change throughout the entire team with that, change up with the faculty. But when we look at Minnesota, they are a team that I think is going to make a push within the next 2 to 3 years to being another Big Ten team that makes a playoff push. We've seen Michigan, Ohio State was the standard. Michigan have gotten their ways up. I think Minnesota's next. I think we'll see Minnesota be a playoff team, or at
Yep.
least a team that's in the picture, especially if they expand it within the next few years. So I think Minnesota is really, really close to getting to where they've been. They've been a team that has really built their way up, but Wisconsin's kind of gone the other way. So I think both teams are going in the right direction. I just think that Minnesota is probably closer than Wisconsin because Wisconsin has really underperformed these last few seasons.
I agree. And I think the pickup of Luke Fickell is really going to help with that. Um, as we all have seen, Luke Fickell has done a marvelous job over at Cincinnati, got them into the top 4 last season. Obviously didn't end very well, but not very many people expected it to. They did hold their own though. But the fact that Luke Fickell is now going to a place that now, if he can recruit the right players, he can be in consistent, consideration of the playoff and stuff at some point, and even Big Ten championships. They've fallen so far this season though. They needed to make a change. And Jim Leonard, you have to give him credit, defensive coordinator turned interim head coach. He got Wisconsin to a bowl game after their slow start. So it's not like Wisconsin's completely dead to rights, but they needed to make a change in leadership, and I think they made the right move. So again, time will tell. As far as Minnesota goes, Minnesota has shown, obviously under PJ Fleck, they're going to be a tough, gritty team. They're not flashy by any means. They don't go out and put 50 points on teams. They like to play the possession game. They hold the ball for well over 40 minutes a game. So that tells you right there, they take advantage of their opportunities, but they limit the other team's opportunities. So they're really good at that. And with that, they finished 8-4 and 5-4 in the Big Ten, which is a solid year for Minnesota. Kind of finishing off, on the college football side of things, we'll talk Nebraska and Iowa. We saw our boys this weekend. They finally get to bring that Heroes Trophy home. Man, how good is that to say? Is that they got Iowa, they beat them for the first time in the last 7 seasons. How are you feeling, man? It feels really good to finally say that Nebraska got that monkey off of their back.
Yeah, I mean, it's on this end, it's bittersweet because even as a pretty I've been a pretty, Husker fan. I've been pretty skeptic about a lot of, I've just been really skeptical about a lot of these, last few seasons. There was a lot of hype early on that I thought was an overshot. And even this last season, especially, I was very skeptical about some of the very large expectation that I felt was just going to go completely out of the way. So obviously the season itself was not great. We didn't see what we wanted to see or what a lot of people expected, but bitter. But here's the sweet part. I mean, we beat Iowa. We have not had that success. We've not been able to have that trophy in Nebraska where it belongs for the last little bit. So that's huge. That right there is the sweet part. And I hope that carries on and that expectation, because we looked great. Now, did we find ways to almost lose like we have? Of course.
Yeah.
But before then, and even closing that game up, Nebraska looked like the real deal. So I do feel really, really, really hopeful for the first time. I'm going to admit, I've not felt this hopeful until now. And maybe it's the hiring of our new coach, which we'll talk about, that's adding on to that. But a lot of it isn't that. It's what we saw this season, because I feel like as Husker fans saying we're getting closer. It's on repeat. It's a broken record.
It's a broken
I think
record.
we can say it now. I think we really, because we did look like that team. So again, bittersweet, because I was at least hoping that we would get ourselves into a decent bowl game, maybe the Big Ten championship, whatever, but that's not going to happen. But at least we went out on a high note. That's all that matters. And that's all you can ever hope for. So, and especially a rivalry game, and as big as a rivalry as this game has became, it's super sweet. The sweet is more than the bitter.
Yeah, I agree. Casey Thompson had himself a very, very good day, completing almost 70% of his passes, went 20 of 30 for 270 yards and 3 touchdowns. 9 of those went to Trey Palmer. Trey Palmer had a very good day, 9 receptions, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns. They absolutely torched Iowa's secondary. Albeit Iowa had some injuries on the back end, Nebraska took advantage of it. But still, Mickey Joseph showed that he could get these players ready to play each and every Saturday that he was the interim head coach. I got to give him the utmost credit, because this team could have honestly quit a few weeks ago, but they didn't. They kept fighting. And that right there just goes to show, it's just like, maybe this team is not that far away. They just need the right guy in charge to get it done. And we'll transition over to that. Matt Rule has been named the Nebraska head coach. My initial thoughts on it, I really like the hire. And we're seeing a lot of national personalities that like the hire as well, because Matt Rule, he coached at Temple. He had a couple of seasons where he was building them up, and then he had a couple of seasons where they won 10 games and won a conference championship with the New Year's Six bowl berth. Then he goes to Baylor. Baylor, obviously, as we all know, had those terrible sanctions and that terrible investigation happen. But he goes into Baylor, and their first season, they went 1-11, but that wasn't really his fault. They lost a bunch of players that were involved in those scandals, and they lost the entire coaching staff. So he was practically starting from scratch. He then transitioned from 1-11 to 7-6 his second year. And then he ended up winning 11 games the year after that, which is the quickest turnaround of any of those, you know, any team in recent memory, really. Um, like it's not too often you see a coach go into a difficult situation and turn them into an 11-win program and with the New Year's Six bowl berth and stuff like that. So I think it's huge because I think Matt Rule has shown he is a program builder. People look at his overall record, which it's 47-43. It's obviously not great, but he does have a really good resume in terms of building teams back up to right around where they should be. And that's what I'm looking forward to most. What are your thoughts on this Matt Rule hire? I'm kind of interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Here's what I have to say right here and right now. It doesn't matter what this guy has or has not accomplished. What I was looking at right away, which is what I was looking at back when we looked into our former head coach, Scott Frost, but back when they were going for that coach's search, it's all about experience. The Nebraska Cornhuskers do not need a head coach who is trying to prove himself, who's trying to do this, who's trying to do that. We do not need that. We need a seasoned coach who knows how to handle the expectations of Nebraska fans. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's a player, a former Nebraska player. You don't understand the expectations that you are given if you do not have that experience. Matt Rule does. He had his first coaching gig in 1998 as a volunteer assistant for Penn State. Yes, that's just volunteer assistant, but he has been around the block. People want to look at the fact that he didn't have a super successful, NFL coaching record. At the end of the day, college football, NFL football, they're two different things. And we see so many iconic coaches, Urban Meyer, who are legends in college football who don't get it done in pro football for reasons. With him, it's about a million, but it doesn't matter. We've seen it go both ways. I don't think the two affect each other. I've seen some people. I've got a buddy who's a Panthers fan, so you're obviously going to know what he probably thinks of Mr. Rule. But the thing is, pro and college are just completely separate. We
Yep.
see legendary coaches in one not have success with other, and that goes both ways. We could see Bill Belichick. We would never see this, but we could see him go to a college team and maybe he doesn't see success. It doesn't mean they're a bad coach. It just means it's not the system and not what they're used to. So, Matt Rule, we've seen him, like you said, he's a program builder. Isn't that what Nebraska needs? In my personal opinion, Nebraska is needing a program builder because we've seen these guys come in with these big promises. It's Mike Riley, Mr. Osborne. He's Tom Osborne Jr. He's such a nice guy. Can he coach football? No. It's Scott Frost. He's a homegrown kid. He's whatever. Can he coach football? Not to what we can see. I'm sure he's a great coach, but we didn't see it in Nebraska, in my opinion. We don't need to take a chance on a coach or to try to mold them after something we've already had. We need a program builder, and
Well,
Matt Rule is that guy. So I think it's a great pickup. I think that Nebraska has needed this type of coach. There was so much hype, even from people that aren't Nebraska fans, so much hype. Urban Meyer is going to be the new coach, all this stuff, all this and that. But at the end of the day, for all of the names that were realistically or unrealistically thrown in, I think Mr. Rule is the absolute best person for the job. And for once, for the last time since we let go of Bo, I finally feel confident going into another season.
I agree. And Matt Rule, when he was interviewed on College Game Day, he alluded to something that has been really a real stickler in Nebraska's eyes the last few years. It's been obvious Nebraska's offensive and defensive lines haven't been great. And Matt Rule pointed out one of the first things he said, it all starts up front. So I think we're going to see a pretty big overhaul on the offensive and defensive line. I think they're going to go they're going to recruit the JUCO levels very, very thoroughly to see if they can get some guys in for next season. And whomever the next strength and conditioning coach is going to do what he needs to do to get the guys on the roster ready for next year. But
You are definitely not going to see the Nebraska you've been seeing. I think that we're going to see a much more soundly calculated Nebraska team that is ready before the season starts. I think that we have seen Nebraska teams that have all of the talent. And again, I don't want to dog Scott Frost because I wanted it to work like most Nebraska fans and most Nebraska natives did. They wanted it to work. We wanted it to work, but it didn't work. And I feel like Nebraska held on a little bit too long. I understand why they did because we had just fired Mike Riley. And just before that, we'd fired Bo Pelini. And you don't want to be an organization or a team that looks like you're just firing your coaches after a few bad seasons. But I
Yep.
think we held on too long. But I think we are finally going to see a Nebraska team that has a coaching staff that makes calculated decisions over here and an absolutely talented roster over here. And that makes a team that will absolutely be ranked top 25 within the next season, even.
I agree. I think Rule and whomever his coaching staff is coming in, I think they're going to have this team ready. I think we're going to see a very, very different looking team next year. One that more so fits the mold of a Big Ten team. They're not going to be as flashy. They're not going to go out and score 30 points, but they're going to be in Iowa or be a Wisconsin to where they hold on to the ball and they have success doing it because they've got the guys up front to block for them, or they've got the defense that can put a stop to people because they're not going to need that offense at that point. We're not going to see that flashy offense that Frost did because it seemed like for a while they were trying to get way too flashy when they really did not need to. Those flashy plays will come with time, but you got to kind of pound the other team into submission for those things to open up. And we saw even this year with Mark Whipple. Mark Whipple was very questionable at play calling, was wanting to call a pass almost every down after Nebraska got 3 or 4 yards on a carry. And Mickey Joseph said it best, we've got to, keep going with those 3 to 4 yard carries because eventually that's going to wear on the opposing team's defense. And I think we're going to see that change of mindset when Matt Rule coaches his first game. He's going to know, okay, we need to hold on to the ball. We need to be careful with the ball. I think we're going to see a more disciplined Nebraska team. I think we're going to see a tougher Nebraska team out there. It's definitely going to be a night and day difference going into next season. Obviously, we're going to talk more about Matt Rule and what it means for Nebraska as it goes on. As obviously, as soon as his staff is solidified, we can go into all that as well. Let's transition over to the NFL. We've had some pretty good games this weekend already. We'll kind of start on Thanksgiving Day. The Lions showed up tough against the Bills. Ultimately came up short. The Bills did what they had to do at the end to win. What are your thoughts on the Bills and the Lions?
Well, here's my thing. I think the Bills, I'm still sticking with this. I think I said this episode 1, maybe episode 2, because I know we've talked more NFL and college football than anything else. But I think the Bills, it's theirs. I don't want to say it's theirs to lose. I don't want to say it because I don't ever want to say that about a football team, especially a pro football team. And B, I already said that about something this episode. I don't want to repeat myself too much. But my main thing is I think that the Buffalo Bills have been a team that has been, this is the championship. This has been the Bills. They've been right there, right below that every single year, getting close enough to see it, but not close enough to win it. I think that this is their year. And the fact that the Lions pushed them up until the end doesn't mean they're not that team. This Lions team has grit. This Lions team, we've, Hard Knocks. If you're a big fan, watching that preseason, watching all of that Hard Knocks, it's awesome. It's great. And they're a team that has really been what that show has been about. They're a gritty team. They're a tough team. And most every single game the Lions have been in, they've kept them decently close. So it's not a blow to the Bills to lose to the Lions, but I think it is a reality check because the fact that they didn't lose, the fact that they almost lost, it was a close game. The fact that you're that close and you almost lost to a team like the Lions, Yes, the Lions are a gritty team, but I do think if you're the Bills, you really batten down and make sure you figure out what you need to figure out, or you might not make it that far in the playoffs. So I don't want to say it's a reality check for the Bills, but it's pretty close because as gritty as the Lions are, you're the Bills. You shouldn't be in a shootout against the Lions and losing to the Lions for most of the game.
Yeah, I agree. The Lions showed a lot of grit. Obviously, the Lions are going to be a team that we're going to have to watch here in the next few years because their current staff has these guys playing really, really tough football. And as much as I hate to say it, we could be talking the Lions winning the NFC North within the next couple of years. They play a very, very tough brand of football. They just got to find a good quarterback. They need that centerpiece, if you will, which in the NFL happens to be your quarterback. So, yeah, the Lions are going to be tough. As far as the Bills go, they did what they had to do, right? They went in to a pretty tough environment in Detroit. It was a sellout crowd. So, and they pulled out the win, and they got their 8th win of the year. The Bills are still one of the best teams in the NFL. In fact, I still have them winning the Super Bowl this year. Um, so we'll see how that prediction pans out. But I think as long as Josh Allen stays healthy, Buffalo is going to be fine.
That's the key. That's all it takes. So if he's out, they're out.
Yeah, I agree. Another game Thanksgiving Day was the Cowboys playing up against division foe New York. They're playing the Giants. Cowboys came up with their 8th win, winning 28-20. Um, what are your thoughts on the Cowboys? Do you think they have what it takes to potentially win the NFC in the postseason? And also the Giants, are the Giants falling a little bit?
So I do want to say I do think the Giants will bottom out, regardless of what I'm going to unfortunately say next about the Cowboys. I think the Giants are going to bottom out. I think the Giants are just like the Jets. They're the two New York teams that are going to start bottoming out. Are they impressive plus teams that are actually winning games now? Yeah, they look decent. They look better than they have, and props to both of those teams. But I think that the Giants and the Jets are two teams that are they're both from New York. That's great. It makes it really awesome. They're both the New York teams that are bottoming out. So I think that New York is going to bottom out, but the Cowboys coming off of that win against the Vikings, to beat the Vikings, a team that is as talented as they are, to beat them, what was it, like 40-3, to beat the Vikings that much and to show that you are that dominant NFC team. If you hate the Cowboys, I know me and you are both pretty, you're not Cowboys haters, but I'm definitely not a Cowboys fan. I don't believe you are either. I hope you're not. We might have to stop this show if you are, because I'm definitely more of a hater than I am a fan. But
Yeah.
if you don't like the Cowboys, you are really not going to like them the rest of the season, because this time is when they started to bottom out last season. This is the time where we started to see their weaknesses, and we're not seeing that now. If anything, we are seeing them only get stronger. And if Dak can stay healthy, if Zeke can stay healthy, if their core aging explosive weapons can stay healthy, they might run away with the NFC. We might see them in that Super Bowl. This is that Dallas team that the so very much annoying Skip Bayless yells about on TV. This could be that team that he's always yelling about. This could be the team that actually makes it back to a Super Bowl. So I think that they are that team. I think the NFC is the Cowboys to lose at this moment.
Yeah, I agree. The NFC East is definitely looking like it's going to be the Cowboys or even the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are playing my Packers right now. The Philadelphia Eagles are obviously really good, but I think it's the division can come down to either the Eagles or the Cowboys at the end of the year. The Cowboys are playing very good football, and I might have to rinse my mouth out after saying that, but they are.
They are
Um,
unfortunately.
yeah, they're playing a good brand of football right now. Uh, so yeah, we'll see. As far as the Giants go, I also think they're gonna start bottoming out a little bit after a really, really good start. Um, it was a game they had to win. They had to beat the Cowboys this weekend, in order to be able to say something's solidifying that they are definitely one of the top teams in the NFC East, which as far as record wise goes, they kind of are. The NFC East is very, very competitive. But again, they needed to beat the Cowboys this weekend, and they ultimately did not do that. I don't think Daniel Jones is the quarterback to really get it done. He's done enough to where they're in games, but is he that quarterback to get him over the top? I honestly don't think so yet. But that remains to be seen. Another game that happened, the Washington Commanders stay red hot. How about my prediction a couple of weeks ago saying that they'll knock off the Eagles? Well, like I alluded to then, the Commanders are red hot and they're playing a pretty good brand of football. What are your thoughts on the Commanders team right now, sitting at 7-5 currently?
I think they're the real deal. I mean, when you called it, we both kind of went over this. I think it was again just last episode. It was awesome seeing that prediction come to light because honestly, I kind of was like, you know what, I'm pretty much on board, but I wasn't completely on board because in what I think I said before was they're that team that's kind of annoying. They're right there every game. Even if they don't, pull it off, they annoy the crap out of each team they play against because we've not seen them get really blown out. They've been in pretty much every game they've had, similar to the Lions. Unfortunately for the Lions, they just don't have as many W's as the Commanders have. But
Yep.
these are teams that are annoying and they gnaw at you. And if you sleepwalk in, they're going to make you pay. But the Commanders have a winning record right now, and we very well could see them in the playoffs. And I think they could be a team that could make it out of the wild card. I think that the Commanders are a team that if they stay healthy and if they keep piecing together wins, we might see them end up out of the wild card. I think they could win it out and they could be a surprise team. I don't want to say that they are going to be a Bengals-esque team from last playoffs, but this could be a team that I could see being close to that type of team, a team that comes in, makes the playoffs, don't expect much, but they actually make it out. So I think the Commanders are a playoff team, and I think that they could even make it past the wild card.
I agree. They're playing very, very tough on both sides of the ball. Obviously not a flashy offense, but they don't need to be when they have a defense as good as the Commanders right now. They're playing very, very well. Albeit they just beat a Falcons team that's 5-7, but that doesn't mean anything. Let's throw the record aside. They still won 19-13 in a very defensive battle. So yeah, time will obviously tell with the Commanders. I think they're going to be a playoff team. I'm still kind of hesitant though when it comes to the wild card. I think they can get past it, but the only thing is, can this team keep their level of play up that they're playing at right now? If they can keep that level of play up, there's no problem in my mind saying that they're going to make it past the wild card, and they could potentially be that Bengals-esque team of last year to make a pretty deep run. But then again, time will tell. Another game today, the Browns won against the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers lost in heartbreak fashion in overtime. The Buccaneers are so dang inconsistent. I think we've beat that dead horse numerous times the last couple of episodes. What are your thoughts on this Bucks team? Obviously, I don't think they're a team to get it done, but I want to hear what you have to say about them because they just lost to a pretty bad Browns team.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I don't think that this is a team that can get it done in the sense of winning a championship. But do I think that they can get out of their woes and still make the playoffs? Absolutely. Do I even think they could figure it out and maybe piece together some wins and be a team that makes it past the wild card? Of course I do. I mean, you've got Tom Brady, and we are starting to see Tom Brady's offensive weapons. Of course, we're losing Gronkowski. You don't have the same talent or the same level of play from Michael Evans. You're missing key pieces, but you still have talent. And so we're starting to see Julio Jones is back in. And I think we're starting to see Brady kind of get back and get into a rhythm. So within the next, finish rest of the season, they play the Falcons, they can beat the Falcons. They play the Panthers, they can beat the Panthers. They play the Cardinals, they can beat the Cardinals. They can beat the Bengals. They can definitely beat the Saints. The only game within the next few games they have that I can see them losing is against the 49ers. Other than that, I see them winning out the rest of their games and making the playoffs. And with a player like Tom Brady and his level of greatness and your talented all-stars that are back and healthy, maybe we see them go on a run and win the rest of them. I just think that this loss to the Browns definitely did not help because we saw them come off of a big win the week before, not the week before, I think 2 weeks before. But you can't go up and down and expect to have the monumental level of success that is expected with Brady. So I think that, are they a playoff team? I definitely think they can win that. Now, if they drop the next game to the Saints, I'm not going to be saying this. I'm going to be saying I think they've missed the playoffs. But if they can string in the rest of their games as wins, or at least only lose one, I think that we're still going to see them in the playoffs, and maybe they make a run at it and figure it out come, playoff time.
Yep, I agree. They're definitely they're very iffy. The Buccaneers are very, very inconsistent on both sides of the ball. Obviously, the last few seasons they had one of the top defenses in the NFL, but that hasn't transitioned over, and Tom Brady hasn't had the year that everybody expected him to. So, yeah, again, can they make the playoffs or squeak in? Yes, but do I think they're going to do much? Probably not.
They could be a wild card bounce. They really could be a wild card bounce. And I think that unless they find some level of success, there's been talks, people were saying, Gronk's going to come back and help them for the playoffs. Well, that's becoming more and more unlikely. You're not going to see we'll probably get to this next. You're not going to see a hot free agent target like Odell Beckham Jr. signed to a team. I don't think the Bucks have more than 5 or 6 wins. So you're not going to see them attract the players they need to get them out of this spot. So I think best case scenario, they're a wild card bounce, and maybe I don't think Brady's going to retire, but I don't think we'll see him in a Bucks uniform. I think we're going to see him move on to the next after this season.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be Brady's last season, at least in Tampa Bay. But the dude just needs to retire. He's had quite a career. He's already proved himself. I don't care if he needs to say that he needs to prove himself again, but he's already got 7 rings. So he's proved himself. He needs to retire, and the Buccaneers need to go a different direction in terms of quarterback. Because I think they need some new leadership right there. We'll touch on one more game in the NFL. How about the Broncos? I think we've talked about the Broncos a number of times. The Broncos, everybody, and I mean everybody thought, along with your boys, the Raiders, everybody thought that those two teams would be battling out on top of the AFC West. And none of that has transpired. Let's be real. The Broncos lost to a downright terrible Panthers squad this year, and they dropped to 3-8. What do the Broncos need to do? Obviously, they can't get rid of Wilson. They signed him to a large contract. What do the Broncos need to do? Do they need to overhaul their entire dang, ads are playing in my ear. That's my bad. But what do they need to overhaul their entire upper management to get this team to where they need to be? Or do they need to find somebody that takes Wilson off their hands? Because obviously their experiment with Wilson has not worked out. What are your thoughts on this Broncos team? What a terrible year for them. And I feel bad for any Broncos fans that are listening to us.
So yeah, as a Raiders fan, I don't feel quite as bad as you might, but I do feel bad because this is a storied franchise that has seen success within the last 10 years. And it is a team that saw a major win, a championship win, and then completely dropped seasons after. And a lot of people could say, Peyton Manning retired, Von Miller got a slew of injuries, wasn't the same. They didn't have the players they needed, lots of injuries, lots of their draft picks didn't probably go to who they should have. So the Broncos have been a team that has kind of shot itself in the foot ever since winning the most important game of the season. So the Broncos have been in this level of, it's been a gray area, it's been a gray level, and the Broncos have been in it since they won a championship. But getting Russell Wilson was supposed to bring them out of it, but arguably they're more in it than they already were. Yeah, you've got a star player like Russell Wilson, but I would rather have someone like Flacco or someone that's at least going to put up honest, possessions and honest games. I just feel like Russell Wilson is just not giving them what is expected of him. And I would rather have a mid to low tier quarterback than a star that is disappointing me every single game. So here's my thing. I don't think they're going to get rid of him. I think if anything, they're just going to do everything they can to build a team around him. But I do think that that is going to mess up a lot of their young core. I think we're going to see them move a lot of players trying to get a team built around Wilson, but I don't think it's going to get better anytime soon. I do see them being a playoff team, a wild card team within the next 2 to 3 to 4 seasons, but I don't see them going past that. And I don't even know if I can say I see them making the wild card next season. I just think that this is a team with no direction and a team that kind of sold out for a championship, and now they're getting what they paid for.
Yeah, I agree. I honestly think, as we all saw, Russell Wilson struggled late in his tenure at Seattle. I honestly think the Broncos jumped the gun on signing Russell Wilson to this big contract because obviously having him there is not helping anything out. Not saying that he's the only thing wrong with the franchise right now, but he is a big piece because as we all see in the NFL, if you have a good quarterback, chances are you're going to do pretty good. And the Broncos have a bunch of talent on that roster, but we haven't seen any of that, come up. We haven't heard any Broncos players come up as MVP candidates or anything like that because there's just not any of them.
No.
And it's kind of shocking because if we were talking before the season, I had the Broncos second behind the Chiefs in the AFC West before the season even started. Because I thought Russell Wilson was going to bring that spark that the Broncos have been missing. Man, it is an absolute dumpster fire over in Denver right now. And they need to get it figured out quick, whether it be overhauling their whole staff or what have you. They have to do what they have to do. Because they, like I said, they have talent and they're already looking up as maybe the number 1 draft pick in the NFL at the end of the year. So they've got to draft well. And I think this team can get where they need to be, but if it's leadership, they need to get it figured out.
It is. I mean, we've seen there's videos leaked of Broncos players visually turning on Wilson and expressing frustration. Are they turning on him? I gotta take that back. They're not turning on him. They're expressing very honest frustration.
Displeasure. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you see that though, when that's captured outside of the locker room, anything can happen in the locker room because yeah, there's more media coverage closer to the locker room than there used to be. Lots of stuff can still happen behind closed doors. But when that's expressed and there's that much anger that it's shown on live TV and it makes its way all over social media, that is a very noticeable sign that there's a lack of leadership. But I don't think that they're going to get rid of Wilson. They've invested too much in him. I think that it's time for them to try to don't overhaul the team, maybe overhaul who's running the team and look at that and then look at the moves you have to make. But the Broncos are a storied organization and we've seen them figure it out time and time again. We're going to see them figure it out. It's just not where anyone expected them to be. And again, even as a Raiders fan, a team that loves to watch the Broncos lose. I always get so excited when I see the Broncos lost. It is upsetting because I was hoping to see this intense rivalry and teams that were trying to take back the West, but we don't see that. So as a fan of football, I hope to see the Broncos kind of find that bounce back that they desperately need.
I hope so too, because the Broncos being good, to your dismay, obviously being a Raiders fan, but the Broncos being good is good for the NFL because, as you alluded to, they are a storied franchise. They have a really good fan base. Like, their historical value to the NFL is huge. And to have a good Broncos team again up there competing with Kansas City for division title or whatever, it's gonna do a lot of good for the NFL. We'll talk more as the season goes on because obviously there's still 6 more games in the season. But let's transition over to OBJ. He the question is, where is he gonna land? Um, I honestly have a feeling he's gonna end up in a place like Dallas. I think Dallas could very well pick him up. And I think it would be a really good pickup for the Cowboys to kind of boost their offense because obviously OBJ is a really good talent when he's healthy. Um, where do you think he's headed? And maybe what are some other potential, landing spots for him?
So I feel like we've been like I totally remember it. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna listen to if it's I don't know which episode it is, but I feel like that we talked about where is OBJ gonna end up. Maybe last I don't know, maybe not. I feel like we had an episode before the Super Bowl where we talked about OBJ and potential teams. Maybe not. I feel like we talked about him in some light. Either way, OBJ has been a player that has been on the move. Ever since he left New York, I don't think he's found a team. Part of that's based on injuries. Part of that's based on the Browns being a dumpster fire organization, and going from the Giants to the Browns was really unfortunate for him. I think he would have seen way more success on a different franchise or even staying with the Giants. That's a different thing. He's off the Giants now, off the Browns, off the Rams, and he's looking for his next home. I'm gonna offer 2 potential landing spots. The one that everybody is expecting is the Cowboys. I think that the Cowboys is very possible. The
Mhm.
Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb. They've got Gallup. The Cowboys have a really young, healthy, really, really, really talented core of receivers, and fitting OBJ in to a talented young core of receivers that already require more than one coverage usually is an
Yep.
absolute recipe for Cowboys success. So it makes sense for everybody. Jerry Jones is going to probably offer him something pretty nice. That's what Jones is known for. Yeah, he's known for a couple of championships, but for the most part, he's known for pretty ridiculous contracts or withholding certain contracts if you're Dak Prescott. But either way, I do think that the Cowboys makes the most sense. Now, obviously, the Vikings were thrown in the mix. The Bills have been thrown in the mix. Heck, even the Giants have been thrown in the mix. And would everybody love to see him back in his Giants? I would love to see him as a Giant again. Personally, nostalgia wise, that legendary OBJ catch in the Giants uni. I mean, you can't forget that. That's etched
Yep.
in your head forever. But a team that I don't think anyone's expecting him to go to, and a big reason is financial wise and just what this team is made up wise. But a team that I can see him surprising people and going to is the Chiefs. Again, I don't think that this is a super likely possibility. And that is why I'm putting it in a separate category and saying, yeah, the Cowboys are the most likely one. And then the Giants are right behind them. And then maybe right behind them is the Vikings and the Bills. But the Chiefs are a team that don't really have that first option. Yes, they have Kelsey. Yes, they have Juju. I believe he went out with an injury. I don't know if he's back. I don't know. I try to dodge all the Chiefs games I can. I'm sorry, but watching Patrick Mahomes torch teams, I don't take much pleasure in that. I'm not a big Mahomes guy. So I try to
Yep.
avoid those games, but I know that they've had a couple of injuries, a couple of things, but I think that this move does make sense for everybody involved because Mahomes has been having himself an MVP caliber season. But if you give him an option, a weapon like Mahomes, and you really open that up and you match him with Kelsey, and you have a healthy Juju, and you just have a healthy young core, that is a really dangerous team. So do I think it's super possible? No. But my two teams that I'm really saying that I think you could go to, the most realistic, I've got the Cowboys. I think it's just a matter of time. I think maybe before we even do our next episode, he'll be a Cowboy. But I think Cowboys and Chiefs are the top two teams for me right now. But then again, the Giants, the Vikings, even the Bills are still in there. And it makes sense for all these teams to go for him. But I mean, Cowboys makes the most sense. And then kind of a curveball, I've got the Chiefs as a potential, front runner that we don't know about.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Dallas is definitely my number one. It's definitely a place where it makes the most sense for him to go. Plus, it gives Dak Prescott a very dangerous weapon on his offense to throw to. If OBJ lands in Dallas, as much as I hate to say it, watch out because Dallas is going to be a different team on offense. Again, we'll have to wait and see. It's going to be interesting tracking to see where he goes. Probably within the next month or so. I think we'll hear something within the next probably half a month. As far as a new destination, possibly. Let's transition over from that and go to MVP award discussion. Who is your MVP so far this season, and who do you think it's going to be at the end?
So again, I don't take much pleasure talking about Patrick Mahomes. I don't hate him. I can't say I hate him. He's a not, he's not a super dislikable. He's pretty likable. He's a likable guy, but I am not a big fan because I have witnessed him tear my Raiders apart in person down in Arrowhead. I believe it was last season, and I think it was just like a 40 plus 30+ point loss to the Chiefs. So I have a little bit of a grudge because of that. Other than that, I don't hate him, but he is by far my MVP. Patrick Mahomes has been showing us and showing me, because I'm going to be honest, I don't want to say I'm a doubter, but within all of my shows I've ever done, ever since the beginning back in 2020 when I did a show with my buddy Chase, I expressed doubts to Mahomes. He had just signed that massive contract. And I was like, yeah, he got you one, but how are you going to get more after this contract and this and that and players aging out, players leaving? It didn't make sense. But he is
Right.
showing us that he is that guy. And the Chiefs are a team that could very well be in the Super Bowl. Do I think they are lacking certain pieces and have certain holes that they've had even when they were at their best and won a Super Bowl? Yeah, every team has holes, every team has problems, but I just think the Chiefs have too many to win it all. But Patrick Mahomes is that guy. So my MVP at the moment is absolutely Patrick Mahomes. And I don't want to say he's running away with it for me, but he's got a couple of steps in front of the people behind him for me. So yeah, Patty Mahomes is my guy right now.
I'm gonna have to agree with your take there. Patrick Mahomes is unbelievable. I think we all have seen that. Um, he's definitely my pick for the MVP, and I think he will end up with the MVP at the end of the year. It's either him or it's going to be Jalen Hurts with the Eagles because Hurts is obviously having a really good year as well. Um, but I think ultimately it's going to end up in uh, Patrick Mahomes' hands for sure.
I think the writing's on the wall at this point, but Jalen Hurts is having himself. People, I mean, the criticism he's received through college to pro, I think that he is definitely silencing some of that criticism and showing that he has what it takes. And shout out to the Eagles, as a Husker guy, Sue, that made me so happy that the Eagles picked up Sue. And I think that could be a pickup that could boost them. So just a random shout out as a Husker fan. It always makes me happy to see Sue on some team. So that was great to see. And I think that's a pretty big pickup. So yeah, the Eagles are definitely a talented team. And do I think they're better than the Chiefs as an entire team? Yes. But Mahomes, I think me and you can both agree, is having himself kind of a just indescribable season that sets him a bar above pretty much every other quarterback in football. I don't think there's anybody that could say Mahomes is not the best quarterback this season. He's set the bar pretty high, and he's a level above a lot of these guys, even Hurts.
Yeah, anybody who says Mahomes isn't the best quarterback in the league right now is pretty delusional. It's pretty clear to me that Mahomes is definitely a step above the other quarterbacks in the league. Jalen Hurts might have something to say, but yeah, so far it's got to go to Patrick Mahomes. He's unbelievable. As we close things out today, for this episode, do you have any other thoughts you would like to throw out?
Um, excuse me, I've got a cough I'd like to throw out really quick. My biggest, the last things I want to say, I guess, for the day are my biggest, I don't want to say my biggest hot take, but a hotter take of mine that I wanted to bring up with you is, do you think that the Bengals have already lost their spark? And even with the great players and the team that they have, do you think that the Bengals have already lost everything they gained? That's just something I've wanted to know, because they've
I
definitely had an underproductive season to what people expected.
I honestly don't think so. They came up with a big win over the Titans today, and they're 7-4. They're still very much in that playoff discussion. I think they're still a good team. Again, there's a lot of season to go, but I honestly think the Bengals just needed to get a couple of things together, and I think they would have been right back where they were.
And I'm with you on
So
that. I think that, and we didn't see them have too much more success last season as a whole, and they made the Super Bowl. They did have more success in certain areas, but I don't think that they were a team that was so much better and they declined as much. But I've seen a lot of the talking heads, the Shannon Sharps, the Skip Baylesses, just yelling and saying, either so much against or so much for. But again, I don't think they're a team that has fallen. Just like I don't think the Giants or the Jets are teams that have risen as much as people think. Yeah, the Jets have had a great season, better than what people thought. Yeah, the Giants have, but I think that these are teams that the bar has been set too high for them, and I think they're starting to come back to earth a little bit.
I agree. Obviously, we'll continue talking about all these teams as the year goes on. And then we'll definitely have a lot more on Nebraska as soon as Matt Rule's staff is solidified, and we'll give our thoughts on all that. Obviously the playoffs are coming soon, so we're probably gonna have a big episode as far as the playoffs, both college and the NFL. So stay tuned for that. And again, thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you next time.